because we still have to find out where we're going to be playing.
Where will we go?
FaZe will ban out first, BootKamp second. And, of course, we don't have Border or Villa able to be played because they were played by these teams in the previous play week.
Yep, so there we go. Oregon it will be. This is one that's always fun to watch Latin America play. It's definitely an interesting map for them. I think one that they have a lot of variety of strategies on. This is one where we see, outside the box kind of strategies, like we always like to point out Wags roaming smoke, for example, the way they play the blitz shields downstairs as opposed to just focusing on, let's, Glaz or Ying the laundry itself. So we'll see what they bring today.
I think there's also a certain level of rigidity to strategy on Oregon, where I think the outside of the box things come into play is in that you need to execute this particular typical default strategy, but you can augment it and adjust it to fit your own team's playstyle and your opponent's particular setup or push on Oregon. So that's usually how Oregon plays out. You're going to have the typical, but it's going to be adjusted in the micro to account for what your opponent's doing and what you as a team will do.
And, of course, the operator bans as well.
Yeah, and, of course, the operator bans, because we've seen times where on Oregon, before Maverick came out, where Habana would get banned, and that would limit the hard destruction potential on the basement in particular. Not so much on the top floor. You would prefer usually to have a thermite up there anyway, but all the while, that doesn't really play into it anymore, considering we have Maverick now as an option. So the hard destruction is kind of hard to limit on Oregon as a map, and there's only particular things you really need to open up. So on that note, it's not that crazy, but you could have other things like banning a Mira, for example. If you get rid of a Mira, the basement defense becomes that much more difficult, and you have to lean on other operators like Mute, for example, which we've
seen bans on that,
Yeah, we've even seen Mute bans.
Also the Thatcher ban as well. So I think it's been, there's definitely some variety in the operator bans in terms of that laundry hold, right? It's all about that. It's not so much about dorms. It's about laundry hold is really what you want to kind of ban against.
I feel like that's what most of it goes into, yeah. So community vote. Who's going to win? Why don't you tell us? I'm guessing it's going to be heavily leaning towards FaZe. And
certainly is.
Yeah.
BootKamp, though, has, and I joke about this a lot, they either 6-0 or get 6-0'd. Seems to be a pretty common thing for them. And I know that's not 100%, but it's certainly consistent enough that they either have an on day or an off day. And if they have an on day, you could switch those percentages. If they have an off day, then I'd say they could probably even be lower than 13%.
Yeah, no, but I'm not at all surprised by this community poll. I mean, almost hitting that 80% for FaZe's favor, and stands to reason. BootKamp are a formidable team, but they have not been having quite the season that FaZe has, and aside from that, FaZe as a team, I think, is just a little bit more notorious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they did have the shake-up, though, that they're going to still have to continue to adjust for that, because it's not just adjusting to a new player, it's all of your strats that have to catch up on, and that's usually a deep map pool, especially for an old team on older maps like this. They're going to have a lot, plus the new operators thrown in. There's a lot of wildcards they have to deal with, throw in the op bans as well, so they're not going to be at the tippy top of their game necessarily, but at the same time, you have the same situation for BootKamp. So that evens it out, I think, a little bit between these two teams, and then FaZe should be much, much stronger in theory here.
All in all, I think this is going to be I want to say a close match, but I'm imagining it's going to be one of those ones where you have one team that's just clearly not in the right groove, and they'll be able to make the rounds come close, but the actual round score is probably going to be a little bit lopsided here. That's how I'm imagining this playing out.
Well, it'll be interesting, too, to see when it comes down to the third bomb sites, whether or not we get Tower or Dining Kitchen. I feel like Dining Kitchen has been tried a lot more. Maybe not necessarily in Latin America, but it's been tried more than it was originally. I mean, I don't have the stats. Maybe you have more hard evidence on that. But
I mean, we did see in Rogue versus Noble in the North American Play Day earlier this week, Oregon was played and went all the way to the final round, and in a 5-5. So it was a draw. But Rogue actually attacked onto Noble's defensive tower.
Yeah, I watched that. That was a pretty good attack.
Yeah, it was a really good attack. They managed to isolate the top floor. And that's why we don't see tower played too terribly much, is that usually the attackers can just isolate a particular section of the tower and plant the diffuser with holding on to the stairs in the attic, and that's really, I mean, it's not that complicated.
Which is why teams maybe should start moving towards Kitchen if they can find a way to work around the problems with that side.
Yeah, but at the same time, with Kitchen, we haven't seen a whole lot of it being played because it's also got a level of rigidity, and it's similar to Tower. So with Tower, it's easy to isolate the whole tower. You as an attacking
Yeah.
team, you can stick so many pins and needles in the defense there that the defenders themselves are going to find it being very difficult to actually rotate anywhere. And then on kitchen defense, it's somewhat similar in that you can take junk tower, which is the smaller tower on the other end of Oregon, with relative ease, and there's almost nothing the defenders can do to stop that. I mean, they can make it hard by playing long angles and setting up traps, but if you put a defender in junk tower, they are going to die. Whether they take anyone with them or not is up to the individual skill. Either way, junk tower is basically defaulted by the defenders no matter what. And as soon as you isolate that junk tower, then it's pretty easy to push into cafeteria from the junk tower and plant the diffuser behind an indestructible wall. Now, because of that, both of these sites are really hard to defend.
It's just areas where they don't have the vertical play that they could use potentially in their favor, right, as a defender.
Well, on kitchen, it's vertical play. On tower, it's actually the opposite. It's the horizontal
For the attackers,
play.
though, taking the vertical play.
Yeah, if they could take the vertical play, but I mean, you got to cut. You can do it on both sites. You can cut off these rotations in either direction. I mean, whether it's kitchen or tower, you can utilize either horizontal or vertical. All that said, though, just speculation. Let's actually get into the match. We've got it's starting out right now. BootKamp will be on attack FaZe on defense.
All right.
We'll have the band FaZe starting. Already, the hard destruction prophecy shining through.
We could actually see a double hard destructor ban. I mean, it's rare, but BootKamp was the one to do it previously on Border, so they're definitely not going to do it this time, though, looks like. They're just going to ban Lion next. So there's at least Habana and Maverick still on the board for hard destruction. I mean, Thermite is definitely one that has played a lot on this, but Habana obviously very useful for the hatch that we were talking about, the hatch being, a big part of that laundry defense, so that probably won't have too big of an impact on it. But Thermite is something I think a lot of Latin American teams like to play anyways, and now that's not going to be available to them.
Yeah, and the bans will continue to play out as you get to look at our wonderful faces as we fix some issues with the stream. We'll get it right back.
But it looks like we got Clash and Echo for the next two. So that is Lion, Thermite, Clash, and Echo off the board. Not too much of a surprise on those defenders, although that again is Mira off the board. I think adding Clash was the one thing to make Mira played more. Just having one other thing that they want to ban.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is if you ban a Mira, you could use a Clash for similar things.
Yeah, it's a walking Mira.
Ultimately, they're both technically information operators. However, Clash also doubles as a bit of a disruption operator. So you've got a lot more, I think, versatility out of that shield than you do out of a Mira. And the Miras are stupidly predictable.
Yeah. To be clear, though, Clash did get a significant nerf yesterday in the way that the shield and the quick switching to the weapon is now much slower, which is a big difference in 1v1s.
Yeah, I mean, nerf is absolutely right, but honestly, I would just call that a sound decision.
Yeah, balancing act.
Yeah, balancing, because Clash was absolutely ridiculous with how fast she could switch her weapons, and now you're not going to be able to just insta-swap, and that is definitely a welcome change.
Well, the advantage of Mirror, though, also is you do get C4, which, depending on the bomb site, a bomb site like this especially can be very important. But we did see, especially in Montreal, I think we saw a lot of good Clash plays for Laundry Basement, I think from Cloud9, Laxing especially. So there's definitely a lot of plays with it either way, but in this case, the way the bans went down, we will see Cameraman on his probably favorite operator on defense.
All right, the overall setup, pretty standard here. A decent amount of indirect denial for that diffuse plant for the defenders. BootKamp going to be clearing the west side very efficiently. They're already pushing their way to cafeteria. Cameraman actually in a really bad spot. He almost got caught out by the IQ, starting to clear in Paula with using that LMG. Very interesting decision for Paula. We have actually seen the LMG see a lot more play after Grim Sky. The recoiled adjustments, or rather the sight misalignment fix, made this weapon considerably better. It just seems like this and a couple other guns, while their recoil wasn't necessarily buffed too terribly, the sight misalignment made it so you could control the recoil that was there.
Yeah. And the commando's so strong now as well that I don't think the AUG will even see much play at all at this point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want to say we have seen the AUG actually see play in Pro League.
Still some preference.
It's just, it's definitely preference. And I think that's something that's going to be weighted by each individual player. Now, BootKamp have managed to clear out the west side, and now they are going to start their push onto the main lobby. This is a very efficient take from
Yeah.
BootKamp right now. We really need to touch on how quickly they've established
Good
this
time
control.
management. I mean, that's also down to the defenders, giving up a lot of that necessarily. I mean, no kills out means they did either pull back or were, just not contesting those areas. But either way, yeah, like you said, a good take. A minute and a half in, and they have a good chunk of map control. But at least Mav can use that against them a little bit with the Pulse, and Intact getting that first kill onto an important defensive operator downstairs. Does mean the defense is starting to lose more than just ground.
Luckily, I believe the mirror windows are already placed, so not the end of the world, but it does cost the defense a C4. So Camera was playing very aggressively in that meeting hall, and he was unable to do any damage. As well, he wasn't really able to waste time, which is the most important thing about that roamer is, if you're not able to at least delay for a little bit, what's the point? BootKamp, due to their efficiency now, can take their time and choose their target wisely.
Nice use of the Evil Eye there to spot that out, and that's going to help the Pulse of Mav know exactly when to throw a C4 and exactly how far to throw it, what particular spot. You see some smokes coming out there as well from Ring to slow this down, and that's going to stall the diffuser plant, so it's a good thing they have that extra time from the fast clear.
The C4 will miss, as did the Thatcher EMP onto the Evil Eye. Duds will take out Mav, and Astro responds immediately onto Duds as he was pushing to the bottom of the stairs, but the diffuser has been planted. Moringa will get the kill onto the planter. Boar using that gas canister. M-King from above will take out Yuna, leaving Moringa in a 1 versus 3, and this is not an easily winnable situation. Pushing up the main stairs, he'll be shut down by Intact, and that's it. BootKamp take round number 1.
Very efficient start, and it's that kind of thing that if they can carry that momentum forward, we could see quite a few rounds go in BootKamp's favor. It was just the swiftness of it, the confidence of that execution, and the fact that they were able to play despite, seeming to struggle a little bit getting for that diffuse plant when it came down to a lot of denial, but they were actually kind of baiting out some of that denial as well, in that the smokes were coming out and they were potentially setting up for that C4 throw, which they almost baited into getting shot on that. Plus it was missed in the end. So great execution by BootKamp and a well-deserved win on that round.
There are a couple of notable mistakes for me from both teams in that round. For example, Boar's Thatcher EMP grenade landed short of the Evil Eye that it was being thrown to disable.
Yeah, that's not good.
And because it didn't disable the Evil Eye, the calls came from the defenders, throw now, throw here. Despite those calls, however,
Yeah, luckily.
The C4s and the gas canisters both missed their mark. So BootKamp made a mistake. It was not capitalized upon by FaZe. And because of that, BootKamp were allowed to plant the diffuser with relative ease, and then the post plant. I mean, that's really the dream on an Oregon basement attack, is you want to get that plant down and have people in the drop. It's hard to lose that.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, too, the one on the, or what should have been on the Evil Eye, the Maestro, is Yuna, who is now the IGL for the team taking over from Gohan. So if anyone should be making accurate calls, it should be Yuna.
Well, definitely a bit of a mistake there for FaZe. And we'll see if they can change that. They are going to go back to the basement again. So no adjustments. We see always a different mentality. We want to say one or another is better. Should you rotate to the new site? Should you stay on the old site? Yeah. And there's always a different result. It's nothing predictable. Sometimes the second time's the charm, and the defenders are able to finally get the win that they wanted on the site that they're defending. Sometimes it's just spirals out of control. Maybe they'll go to it a third time or a fourth time and just continue to lose one after another on that basement hold. But it's all up to FaZe Clan, really. BootKamp, again, a very efficient clear of the roamers. I love the teamwork between the droning and the pushing from BootKamp. They are not giving an inch to FaZe on the west side of this building.
Yeah, I like that they took Kitchen so swiftly within that first 30 seconds there, thanks to the droning and the position you were talking about there. And Astro, despite his attempts at contesting it, is really not accomplishing anything. They're just stacked up in meeting hall, but now they're stacked up waiting to get picked by that grenade from Intact. Looks like maybe an ADS picked it up and didn't do any damage.
Yep.
But nonetheless, that's going to start to put positional pressure on them. Now they either have to fight it or rotate.
Looks like they're just keen on isolating meeting hall for now. If they can open up the drop down, which they have just done, and simply go for another diffuse plant, all they need to do in the meantime is deny rotation from this meeting hall. You can see they have the drones and the information on all the meeting hall roamers to do just that. All they now have is the nade. Oh no! Jack! You saw his mouse was wiggling a little bit too much. Camera reads it perfectly, and the double kill C4 will put FaZe in the driver's seat. A huge mistake from a singular player on BootKamp, and now the entire attack has halted.
I feel like that right there just cut off one of their legs of this attack. Just now the Meeting Hall can do what it wants to do, and Astra is able to keep control of it, take down Pala. It is now a 2v5, and they're going to continue to contest this, despite it being in the favor of the defenders.
You can see Boar looking for his fight, and he's going to find it, but also lose it. Nice shot there from Astro. The first kill for BootKamp, from M King onto camera through this little gap. And he's going to try and retrieve his teammate, which is very likely to happen. Of course, Astro cannot necessarily know that he downed his teammate. If you're unfamiliar, in Pro League, there is no point notifier, so you are not told if you down someone. You have to actually see the action of downing them or know how much damage that person has or can take and deal just that amount. It's all a calculation that you as a player have to make. But last 30 seconds here, plenty of anti-plant or indirect denial here from FaZe. The C4s, the gas canisters well in hand, and this is not going to be an easy push for BootKamp as they start the way. Yuna will take out Boar just as he peeks down the stairs. The Nitro's going to miss, but M King will die to Astro as well on the top floor, so FaZe, a very solid defense there, and it all started with Intact.
Yeah, it's got to be unfortunate when you feel like there's a good reason to say you pretty much cost your team that round, but there was also the decisions made on how they picked him up, right? Because had they just been a kill on him with that C4, not as big a deal, but getting the twofer on two important attacking operators that are going to put a lot of pressure to the Zofia and the Buck, that's an important set of kills early on, and the fact that they kept trying to push it and weren't able to trade it, that was a series of dominoes collapsing at that point.
I think it's also more than that, though. I mean, it was what should have been an easy kill for Intact, turning into a double kill for FaZe, because they had cleared out the ADS. They put a lot of effort, BootKamp, put a lot of effort into clearing out the ADS, and then after they had done that, they were like, okay, here you go, Intact, get the grenade kill.
Yeah.
Something that I noticed when he was going for that nade kill as well is his mouse, I'm not sure why, or his maybe his hand, whatever the case, but his crosshair was wobbling all over the screen.
You know, they have very high sensitivity in Latin America, so it's not
a
surprise to see that could be the case. Could even be there could have been a hair on his mouse pad causing it to wiggle, you know?
It's entirely possible. Whatever the case, his mouse was wobbling quite a bit, and it did end up costing his team.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I also note out of that round, aside from the grenade, because that was a huge mistake from BootKamp, but they made another one. After they missed the nade, they recommitted the rest of their players to clearing out that meeting hall. At that point, you need to cut off the leg and cauterize the wound, because it's dead now. You need to focus on your take into the site and isolate the meeting hall roamers as much as possible. Cut off the rotations, yes, so they can't influence the round any further, but you can't be focusing on taking meeting at that point.
It wasn't terrible in the sense that M King had a nice flank from above. It's the fact that Thatcher pushed too early without the support from M King that cost them. They pushed it one at a time at that point, because it was a nice, distract a little bit, throw a few pre-fire shots, get him into a position where M King can get that kill. Sure, but he's getting downed early and just getting taken out. Yeah, that was just continuing to commit to it in the wrong way, especially.
So, BootKamp now going to be isolating the garage so they can get a free kill onto Cameraman. So Intact already making up for his earlier blunder.
Well done by Intact. Much, much better this time.
Good communication there from BootKamp. One thing I definitely do notice from this team is their drone work and information is just absolutely fantastic. They know exactly where they want to place their utility. That grenade was very likely just to clear out the main main hallway. As you can see, there's a mirror window placed in that main hallway facing towards Master. Potentially trying to get a kill there, but no matter what, you have pushed the FaZe defenders back to the site.
Well, we'll see if they can continue that push, though. There's at least one dead, and that's going to give them some advantage, but it's not an operator that's going to continue to get better like a Smoke or a Legion would later in the round. But Yuna taking a lot of damage is going to help with that as well. If they could take him down and no more C4s on the board at that point, and it's just down to goo mines and smokes, then that will be a much better position to be in. But I think Yuna probably going to play it a little more careful this time, and this is where things start to slow down as they look for those picks. But you see them continuing to drone, so they're definitely doing a good job, as you said, making sure they're not walking blindly to things outside of the meeting hall blunder last round.
And the reason they can continue to drone in this instance is because they've been so efficient yet again in taking their initial beachhead, establishing the control early on in the locations that they know they need, and then you could start your information gathering phase. You don't have to do it all in one fell swoop. You can do it one step at a time, and that's how BootKamp is managing it. Now, FaZe are looking for another knock out of the park. If they can get a C4 in the right place, then this could start swinging back their way. But they've already lost a lot of HP on Yuna, and of course that one player in camera. Paula's also going to eliminate Mav, so it's looking worse and worse for the defenders as time goes on. As Boar lands a headshot onto Astro. A beautiful peek from the main window. Duds in aggressively will eliminate Yuna, and it's a perfect round for BootKamp as M King takes down Moringa.
So far, outside the little blunder we saw last round for BootKamp, they've been looking very vicious so far, being very efficient. Then they kind of slow down, do some droning, get the initial positioning of the defenders that they've managed to push back onto site so they can execute on the site. And you saw that was a very good execution on the site as well. It didn't seem like they were in situations where it was just down to gunfights. It was down to gunfights that they knew they were going to win. You saw them taking the angles they knew where the people were playing at and taking them, not necessarily with pre-fires, but good coverage from multiple teammates from multiple angles, even able to just push right on into kids if necessary. It was a good execute, and I'm seeing a lot of confident play from BootKamp, but it's good to see they didn't get too tilted by the previous round.
And one thing to really take away from the last 3 rounds is that they have been an absolute breeze. BootKamp have been, even when they're losing, they're doing it really quickly.
Thank you, BootKamp.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting to see the high level of efficiency from their play. I got to give them massive props for it. It means that they have so much more room to breathe when they're in a situation that they need that extra time. When you're pushing the site, you're not pushing the site the last 20 seconds, fantastic. Then you have options at your fingertips. You can make maneuvers that otherwise are impossible due to that time restriction. So
I think that's part of the reason we're not seeing very many trades back either. When it comes down to the end execution that they're going for, you're seeing very few trades back from FaZe because of that extra time they're able to play with. They're less desperate for that push.
So, again, props to BootKamp. Now, it's not all over yet for FaZe. As much as this has looked like a dominant match, and it certainly has looked like a fairly dominant match, outside of that one major mistake from BootKamp, there's still potential for recovery here. FaZe is going to go up to the top floor again for the second try. Now, it's very unlikely they're going to allow for Cameraman to be so easily eliminated inside of Armory this time around. He'll probably play a more dynamic role and not leave himself open to that same play.
Yeah, we'll see. And of course, we'll see how things flip around when the execution's on the other side and we have FaZe on attack and how well BootKamp can be on defense. But they're going to be trying the same bomb sites multiple times here, of course, because there is 2 bomb sites you want to play, and that's about it. So Laundry and Dorms. So Dorms' second try again. Now, their second try of Laundry was where they kind of struggled a bit, but their second try of Dorms, I imagine, probably not going to fall folly to the same issues they had on the second execute of Laundry. So it just depends on whether or not FaZe can read into the efficiency of that attack and maybe cut off some portions of that in some way. But they're not bringing anything to really deny the droning, for example. We're not seeing a mute come out to be able to slow down the swiftness of that execute.
The setup is very much the same here from FaZe. Meanwhile, BootKamp are addressing it differently. They know that the same trick won't work twice. They've decided to bring out a Maverick Torch in the garage. Now, this is very clever because they don't make any sound with that Maverick Torch. The grenade from the window is not going to do any damage as Cameraman is in the adjacent corner. The mark is going to be a little bit belated there, and Intact will miss both of his nades in this round. And Cameraman able to stay alive is going to delay this push from BootKamp quite a lot. They're aware of his position here, and they're trying to do everything they can to deal with it, but it's not going to work out for them. Duds will get a double kill, though, in response to Cameraman's single. Paulo goes down, so the Maverick gone, but full control of Master and Armory side for BootKamp.
I do kind of question whether or not they needed to switch Intact from Buck to Sledge. As had he been Buck, they might have been able to take out Cameraman a little bit easier without costing them a teammate in the process. Yeah, the grenades missed. That happens. Not a big deal. But the inability to sledge upwards, I think, was a big problem for him.
Absolutely agree. But they did manage to recover it, and that's the most important thing. It's all thanks to the efforts of Duds, the singular fragging machine in this round for BootKamp. You can see Mav on a power position at the top of the white stairs, and if he should die here, it's going to deny a lot of crossfire for FaZe. And since he's being pressured from that main west window, that's Boar, and there is potential for that. If he ever wide peaks, he leaves himself exposed. Intact, speaking of crossfires, trying to go for one on the North Rappel, but look at this. For the first time in a while, since that second round, we find BootKamp running out of time. Duds will get downed by a C4 from Yuna, but no actual kill. As Yuna starts to peek onto the main hallway, he's been exposed. Mav, a nice kill, but it followed up by M-King. Astro also gets 4, and it's just a complete back and forth, leaving M-King the only attacker left with 4 seconds left. He doesn't have time to get 2 kills, and FaZe will take this defense. An excellent hold there from FaZe. Despite being at the man disadvantage early on, they still managed to make it work.
I think the important thing was they had enough people left alive to cover all those crossfires you mentioning, because there's only so many angles you can approach from as an attacker. I mean, there are quite a few, to be fair, but if you have the manpower to cover all of them and you can play them fast enough and with enough gunplay advantage to be able to collapse on them quickly like that, it's very difficult to push in. I mean, we did see a pretty good execute last time when they went to push in, but I think they maybe had a little bit more of an advantage going into that. As you mentioned, time as well was not on their side this time, and I think that also hurt them to an extent. We'll see if they can continue their success, though, when we go to laundry, because this is, of course, a 2-2 situation, so we always like to point out which team comes out ahead, and that's because, whenever it's like this, only one team can come out with an extra point, and that gives them an advantage going to the side switch, and if they happen to be better on that side switch, that usually snowballs quite a bit.
Well, somewhat luckily for FaZe, due to the way the rounds have played out, they will be able to go back to the basement, so no off-sites for FaZe's defense.
I mean, yeah, I guess that works out. You don't necessarily have to play your off-sites, and you got 2 chances on either of your main sites. Well, a 3rd chance now for laundry. But obviously, it doesn't make sense to, throw rounds to end up in that situation, as you don't get any advantage versus playing one of the off-sites and chancing it.
I think the big thing here for FaZe is that they now have the potential, or at least very likely, to put this into a victory of the first half in their favor. And since they've seemingly managed to figure out the formula for the basement, now, of course, the things to remember are that last time BootKamp lost here was also the last time they attacked here, and the reason that was the case was the C4 in the meeting hall, and that was all due to Intax missing his name.
And one thing to keep in mind as well is not only can the Thatcher, as you mentioned, disable the Evil Eye, something we often forget about a lot is the fact that he can also disable Pulse, the other one that was trying to be able to get some intel to be able to do that C4. So disabling both of those with the Thatcher would give them a good advantage on that plant, outside of dealing with the Mira. But, what can you do?
Well, kitchen already cleared here for BootKamp, thanks to Paul's aggressive play, which we have been seeing him do quite a bit. Earlier he was playing IQ and doing this very same thing, but he has made a rotation onto Maverick.
I'd say that's been working okay, but I do think he was maybe a little bit more effective on IQ, but either way, they're still managing to take rounds to an extent.
FaZe, with their very standard setup. Paula, love this. He's actually opening up a murder hole through the reinforced wall on the west side of the meeting hall. That could get cameraman if camera should peek at any moment. Oh, here we go. Second try for Intact, and he's going to land the
there
nade,
we go.
Cameraman will go down.
That is definitely a problem. They rely way too much on those sandbags, and I think the sandbags are, I'd say, pretty well figured out when Intact can land those grenades and clear the ADSs first. What can you do at that point?
Yeah, so it's all working out for BootKamp so far. A C4 lost and a player as well. Astro was lit up as he did successfully fall back out of the meeting hall, but he's still in play. As long as you got a gun, you can still do some damage, and he certainly will be able to do that. Matt playing an interesting position in the main hallway. Usually you're going to put your pulse in the little closet, the laundry closet, from there he can use his heartbeat detector to gather information without sitting behind the mirror window, which means he's not exposed to any grenades or Xcaros charges. But not the case here. They're instead choosing to play him in odd positions. Yuna's going to take up that spot now, trying to peek under the main hallway. This is definitely the right spot for a Maestro, but he's still got those Evil Eyes in play.
Yeah, he's not going to be watching, though. He's more focused on playing this ACOG, which means he's going to depend on another teammate to watch that angle for him.
You can see the C4 will come out, and it will not miss this time. Mav manages to land it. Yuna will also take out M-King. The lack of smoke seriously hurting FaZe right now, or rather BootKamp, as they attempt to make their push. FaZe, on the other hand, really happy about that. Moringa, Impact, and Gas Canister combination onto Duds will get the kill. Now, it looks like it's going to be a FaZe round. Despite the great start to this round for BootKamp, they just don't have the utility they need to get a diffuser plant. Mav will be calling out the rotation. Astro, the teamwork here, will get the final 2 kills, and FaZe take it 3-2 in the first half.
I got to concur that the lack of utility is really what's costing them. I mean, yeah, maybe they have the Thatcher for the Evil Eye, but that's not even really a big factor at the point. The fact that they can continue to C4 and shoot at you without you being able to do anything to hamper their visibility, I think is going to be continue to be a big problem for those kinds of pushes. That's why we saw, once smokes and glasses, for example, became a big thing, the ability to smoke down there is such a big factor. And plus, we've seen even teams smoke and then just plant at the foot of the stairs just to be able to take advantage of that smoke. The lack of any kind of vision denial just means you're walking into a trap at that point because they're watching all the angles at once and even have a pulse, so you don't have to directly watch. So we'll see, though, as the sides switch, they are going to start on Laundry as well. And we're going to see Cameraman do a little bit of a sneaky switch here from Maverick to Ying. So we'll see how that goes down. Speaking of a coverage on the basement there, you have the Capitao for the smoke and the Candelas.
Yeah, so you could see that FaZe, unlike BootKamp, are aware that you need to have at least a little bit of smoke for cover, and if not smoke, then some form of disruption. For example, those Candelas. Now, of course, Lion is usually one of the easier solutions to this problem. He's not as direct, whereby you can't really stop somebody from C4ing you.
Yeah.
Like, for example, that Mav position he was playing as Pulse, that was a pre-aimed C4. He knew exactly what angle he needed to land that one, and he doesn't need to move to land it. So, but yeah, he's banned out here, and he won't be affecting the game either way. Yeah, no surprise. You're absolutely right. We haven't seen any Dukabi play yet. It does seem like she's kind of fallen off the map here.
Yeah, that nerf to the SMG-12, I think, did a significant damage to that pick rate.
For these teams in particular. While the CZ is still a decent gun, it's just not the same as that old SMG-12 for sure.
It's definitely a little more difficult to handle because of the way the iron sights work. And there are people like me who've been playing it since the beginning that I'm sure are fine with it, but nice early damage there coming out from Mav potentially. Nope, didn't land anything, but
yeah, I missed those shots. That was unfortunate for Mav. One thing of note though, FaZe really quite slow on this clear.
Yeah.
They're only now just starting to push their way through the west side, and the interesting thing about that is that BootKamp have fully reinforced the kitchen closet wall, which means that the likelihood of a west roamer is very, very low.
Yeah, you usually want to be able to fall back to meeting hall, right? You don't want to give yourself a position where you're cornered in the pantry, because you can't really fight your way out of that.
The only other reason we would have a west side roamer is on the top floor, and that is also reinforced. So there is no rotation back into meeting hall for BootKamp, so none of them are going to be roaming despite this somewhat slow roam clear for FaZe. Now, as the Xcaros opens up the meeting hall wall, Paula's still playing close to that entrance to meeting hall, so he leaves himself in a very exposed position.
Well, they are going to play this still fairly aggressively from inside the meeting hall, though, taking a lot of peeks. If they can continue to just even pre-fire those and just keep them busy, and we don't see a change up from FaZe in terms of their take, they could burn enough time. As you mentioned, they were just not being as swift.
Paula's trying to challenge the meeting hall entrance, but there are 3 attackers. He will go down. Dud's able to eliminate Cameraman elsewhere, and that's the Ying no longer on the board. A huge operator to get rid of. And BootKamp still have plenty of anti-plant utility. Only going to be holding onto the mirror window fast, but the Capitao could change that. A double kill for Duds. He goes for a triple, but Mav will shut him down. So BootKamp have done their damage with the roamers, but they've now finally lost all of them, and they're going to have to rely on the anchors to deny the plant as we come down to the last 40 seconds.
Well, like you said, in this 3v3, the utility goes, I'd say, in the favor of the defenders, but there is still the Capitao in play that could be a factor, but I can't see the Habana or the Thatcher really making a significant difference in this attack, but there comes the smoke from the Capitao. 30 seconds left to execute.
Gas canisters to try and deny the plant, and it doesn't look like the plant's going to go down intact. Well-placed gas canisters to counter the smokes, and that means there will not be any smokes to cover the actual eventual plant, but Yuna seems confident in the cover from his teammates regardless. It's not going to matter how confident he is as we come down to the last 6 seconds. The C4 will miss from Boar. Moringa eliminates him as he attempts to rotate. Another one for Moringa, and the diffuse plant goes down. FaZe take the round. And BootKamp really struggling on that basement hold.
Well, despite some good pressure, they just didn't have the ability to peek those angles. It was just a good hold, good coverage from both upstairs and from the bottom of the stairs. That's absolutely what won it. It was just down to, we're going to keep trying to plant, but we're going to cover it so hard from our other two teammates, you're not going to be able to peek us and do anything about it. That's really what cost them. I mean, I don't think the Evil Eye necessarily would have made a difference in that case if they'd had it the same way that FaZe had. I mean, maybe they could have done something with it, some little ticks of damage or been able to pre-fire a little bit easier, but just good play there. You saw the 2 kills from upstairs, especially from the hatch, were a nice hold on that and just couldn't do much to stop that. But that takes the 1-point lead into a 2-point lead, and FaZe are now 1 round away from locking up at the very least a tie. Oh, that Glass is not going to happen. You're just teasing it out there.
You would expect Glass to actually make it all the way through, but the Thatcher makes a lot of sense for sure. Mute's still on the board. So if you don't see a Thatcher, you could 6-pick onto a Mute to try and slow up the attack, and that might be what FaZe is trying to bait out right now. But it's not going to happen. BootKamp will stay true to their strategy.
Well, they are going to go with the Evil Eye, looks like, or at least a Evil Eye. I'm not sure where they're going to place it, but they are bringing Maestro now. So we'll see if they go for a similar strategy in terms of trying to deny it, but they're going to have to deal with maybe seeing through smoke from Mav's Capitao, as well as dealing with the Yings blinding them, so that will give them some ability to see into there when they try and go for a plant. You saw, like you said, some well-placed smokes last time that were thrown well, but the ability to call out exactly where they're positioned, there's only a few real plant positions, means that you can get a much more accurate smoke and not waste as much smoke, doing more damage, and then making it much more possible that a second smoke would be lethal, even if the first isn't.
Yeah, you saw Intact use all 3 of his smokes in the same go because of the smoke grenades from the attackers. He just wasn't sure which of the 3 default spots would be planted in, so he had to go for middle of the room, over by the laundry bins, and then at the washer, which is a lot of utility for one use. And if he had had 1 more gas canister left, he probably could have denied the actual plant when it came down. But not to be. And FaZe look in tip-top form, winning 3 rounds in a row. This seemed almost as if it was going to be a BootKamp map. I mean, they weren't completely dominating FaZe, but they were looking so very strong, and it was very one-sided in the first 3 rounds. The only round BootKamp managed to lose in the early stages of this game was due to their own mistakes. But that has then since taken a huge turn, and FaZe look like they're in the driver's seat.
Maybe it's just a case of attackers being a little bit more favored on this map, and not necessarily in the whole meta, but I just mean in this particular matchup here between these 2 teams.
I mean, they won they're on a 3-round winner streak right now, and they won the first 2 of those rounds on defense.
Yeah.
So I mean, they've just been looking better in the second, even before the second half of this match.
That's true, and they definitely were managing to adjust to what BootKamp were bringing. Now BootKamp have to do the same. Of course, they've only lost 1 round on defense so far, so they also have plenty of time to adjust. But 2 rounds lost will be enough to cost them the map.
So BootKamp have adjusted their strategy on this basement hold to roaming heavily, which is actually going to cost them. They do take out Astro, so as I say that, they have a decent start to this round. A nice shot there from Paula. But what I was trying to get at there is that the attack strategy from FaZe is tower and construction right now. The roam is not great at dealing with this attack strategy, but luckily for BootKamp, FaZe seems to be taking this awfully slow.
Yeah, they have. I mean, there's still good defenders downstairs, but yeah, FaZe are definitely taking it slow. At least they get duds, though, off the board. That's an important kill, but they still have yet to finish off Pala.
Yeah. Meeting Hall control established for FaZe. M King will take out Moringa, but he's being pushed off the mirror window thanks to that firebolt from Mav. Mav, though, is stuck in a bit of a corner here. He knows he has to contest with at least 1 defender at the end of that hallway to the left. Candela will blind the defender there, but also looks like blind Mav, who will go down to Paula as he peeks around the corner. Second Candela poorly timed, and you can see FaZe has made their way into the site, but they're losing a lot of bodies in the process, and BootKamp will just shut them out.
I mean, I got to attribute some of that to the slowness of the attack in terms of their getting onto the actual pressure means that much more time for those defenders that you were talking about maybe being too far off site to rotate back. And you saw, for example, Pala even come all the way back and get a nice kill in there. So the fact that they kind of read into that, it was a little too slow. I mean, to be fair, you want to get some intel before you press for an attack. But ultimately, I think it cost them a bit too much in terms of that time management, because you saw them get shut down one after another. But you also, as you pointed out, that Ying, not the greatest plays in terms of those Candelas. I mean, it was a nice idea, but just the coordination wasn't there. And that's always the hardest part about having a Ying player on your team, is making sure you don't blind teammates.
Yeah, I think utility placement for both teams, whether on attack or defense, has been pretty bad so far through this match. And it's definitely something that both squads need to work on. Some of the more proficient utility placement we saw was, for example, that C4 from Mav downstairs. That was, though, I believe, let me see, the third time that FaZe had defended the bottom floor before they managed to get that C4 down.
So it took them a few tries.
It took them a few tries, yeah. And there's some work that needs to be done there. Some refinement, for sure.
You think they'd have that better practice, because it's not only is that such a common thing, this is the region that originally did that more than any other, is the C4 defenses versus smokes.
See, that's the thing. When FaZe was throwing their C4s in the first two basement defenses, it looked like they were landing right on the mark, but when detonated, they just didn't kill the defuse planter.
That's true.
That was in the first round, at least. In the second round, of course, the C4 in the meeting hall entrance managed to do some pretty nasty work. But yeah, the first go around, FaZe looked like they had it. It just didn't happen for whatever reason. So must have just been an inch off. Whatever. It's now done, and we're moving on to another defense of the top four. Actually, the first defense of the top four here for BootKamp. They haven't gone upstairs yet. In fact,
that's 2 cameras dedicated to that one area.
This map has been mostly bottom floor. 5 defenses of the bottom floor so far, and this is the 3rd top floor hold, and there's no deviation off of those 2 sites.
Yeah, dorms has definitely been one that's been a bit harder, it seems like, for the teams to defend successfully. And some of it comes down to just those gunfights once it actually goes to the press, because everyone kind of gets cornered up in the site.
You can see very close engagement here between Duds and Mav. The Jaeger on so little HP, he very likely went into a fight with Mav earlier in the round that we probably missed. And
Moringa's drone.
Yeah, this is good teamwork here from FaZe. Moringa's going to call out the Jaeger's position, and the spray through the wall will down Duds, which has also been called out, and Mav gets the kill. Good clear of the bottom floor there for FaZe, and they did it with well, great efficiency. You can see only a minute expended to get that frag.
Yeah, definitely a good start for them. I mean, Mav did take a bit of damage in the process, but I have a feeling he'll probably live long enough to get some utility out of his crossbows. So that's really the important thing there. They are playing a fairly aggressive roam here in terms of peeking things they probably don't need to peek, and that could cost them when it comes to defending the actual site itself, because they are already at the man disadvantage. But, as I mentioned earlier, I guess Mav's low health did come back to bite him. Great peek from Pella.
No, he doesn't need to peek that, but I guess it's, yeah, if it works.
If it works, yeah.
Right? I think that's a typical trait of LATAM, though, so it's not terribly surprising.
Yeah.
FaZe now, while they have lost Mav, they still have a decent chunk of control. They're going to need to shift their focus a little bit, though. They've spent a lot of that time clearing the bottom floor and the meeting hall, and now they're actually starting on their push from Master and Armory into the site.
Well, 4v4, still a significant amount of time left in terms of trying to push this with all the map control the attackers have. But they did lose a bit of utility in terms of now they can't use the firebolts to cut off rotations, but they have the Candelas to do some serious pressure, along with the concussion mines from Astro. So some good utility going to come flying in here, and it's going to come down to some utility flying back with 2 C4s and smokes.
Impacts and gas canisters to stop the push in through the main hallway. Though the focus for FaZe is clearly opening up that closet wall, which they have done. Astro gets the initial entry onto Pala. The Ying Candela is perfectly placed, and Camera will back them up with a kill onto M-King. Right in front of the mirror window, he goes undetected and gets a second for himself. The shotgun from Intact will down him through the wall, but it's not going to do any more work than that. FaZe will lock that out. 5-3 now in their favor. An absolutely dominant round just now. All thanks to excellent utility placement, most notably those Candelas.
Yeah, and then great follow-ups, of course, from Astro. Great plays by him, as well as Cameraman. Both of those two have definitely been doing a lot of work, I'd say, for their team so far. I mean, Astro, especially on fragging, but some good utility plays from Cameraman is definitely paying off. That was a good Ying coordination. That's what we should have seen on the basement attack previously. But nonetheless, they definitely took that round, and now they have a guaranteed tie, if not a win here, because BootKamp are going to need to come back 2 rounds in a row just to tie it up.
So, kids' dorms yet again, as they are unable to go to the basement, if I'm not mistaken, and they're going to try and
they still have
lock
to play
out that top floor.
Unfortunate for them, as that was the only bomb site they successfully defended.
Yeah, it did seem like the first time they went to it did seem like they were struggling a little bit, but the second go on the bottom floor was pretty solid for BootKamp. You could attribute that to the rotation from FaZe, that they decided to attack through the construction tunnel and tower instead of the main lobby, and the reason being, of course, that's a much more linear strategy. But BootKamp still managed to make it work, and that's the most important thing.
Either way, we are following the pattern that we saw in the first half, which is attack, defense, attack. So, of course, if that repeats, anytime you have an exact mirror, of course, you end up in a 5-5 situation. So that'd be a case where that BootKamp could tie it up. But I think that's a little less likely. I mean, we saw a great start to BootKamp, but they have seemed to kind of lose a little bit of the edge as FaZe is kind of warmed up now. I don't think Pallet changing over to Doc is going to be a big game changer in that, but it'd be interesting to see if maybe he's going to get some long-range peeks or just play some good angles. Some cheeky plays with that ACOG.
No, the thing is, he's 6-picked from Doc onto Doc. I guess they just weren't sure about what operators they wanted to play earlier in the round. But I don't think it's going to change too much either. Of course, giving a little bit more longevity to some of the operators. Should they get into some engagements, they can heal up and get back into a new engagement at full HP.
I mean, I would say it would matter more if they still had the Valkyrie with the cameras outside that they were doing previously, so that they could know when to peek and play those long angles from the ACOG. But in this case, they don't have that anymore, so that's not even going to be a factor.
Yeah, Valkyrie, a very coveted operator from many teams, but seemingly not being too crazy in this match.
It's a good map for it, too, for the most part, just because of the outside play, especially on the towers themselves.
Certainly is. I think this is definitely a Valkyrie map. Now, FaZe, taking this slow. You can see BootKamp still have a lot of roamers, but none in the kitchen, which is kind of interesting. Usually most of their roamers are actually just on the armory side, which is great if you're trying to prevent a push from the armory, but clearly that's not the strategy right now for FaZe, as they force M-King off the top of the white stairs. They're coming hard from the west side.
That was a nice play, taking him off that position. Didn't do a ton of damage because Doc's going to be able to heal him up right away, but nonetheless, it was a good start in terms of making that position much, much more compromised when they go to actually make an attack on it.
Yeah, it's going to be harder to play at the top of white stairs as a defender, which eliminates one of the many crossfires that is very important for the defense on this floor.
Well, at least they got some use out of Doc's stim pistol, guaranteed.
Yeah, true. Yeah, he has been useful in this round. Astro going to drone out the top of the stairs to confirm that it is indeed not being played by the defense right now. The most notable thing here is, of course, the fact that we only have a minute left, and this is still a 5 versus 5.
Yeah, this is definitely, again, a slow attack by FaZe. In this case, though, at least they haven't lost anyone in the process. Moringa, the only one to take a little bit of damage. But Pala is taking advantage of that long angle and does do a lot of damage there to Cameraman, but not finishing the job is going to be a big problem if he's still able to use that utility.
Playing a dangerous game here, Paula, but he's managed to make it work out for him somewhat in doing that damage. Though his play has been read by the attackers. Astro will get the first kill. Intact going down is a good start. A second for Astro as Paula tries to fight this main window. He will get it down, but not a kill. Cameraman is there to support his teammates, leaving Duds and M-King the last 2 defenders, but 1 for each of them, and they're still in this. Mav will get Duds. M-King in a great position, though. He's got to find 3 kills. 2 of them very lit up, but it's just not going to happen. The pre-fire from Cameraman, and FaZe will take the round and the match. 6-3.
Nicely done by FaZe. Like we were saying, they had a little bit of a slow start, but they made the adjustments that they needed to each time. And a great execution, I'd say, that last round in terms of baiting out Paula, because Paula had potentially 2 kills on both the Capitao and the Ying, but neither of those were able to stick, just wasn't able to hit enough damage. That's the disadvantage, of course, of the MP5. It is very weak. If you can hit those headshots, it's fantastic. If not, you're not going to be doing a ton of damage to most people, although he did do quite a bit to Cameraman. Nonetheless, you can see some serious work there came out from Astro, Cameraman as well with a 7. And a decent spread there for the players on BootKamp, but nonetheless, that is BootKamp losing their match, and that's going to secure FaZe up at the top of the leaderboard as they were already at the top. Now they're going to have 3 more points.
That was also a very fast match.
I feel like it was, yeah.
Not in the round count. We went to 9 rounds, but 9 rounds out of the possible 10. But each of those rounds, especially in the first half when it was BootKamp attacking, seemed to transpire much quicker than, or much faster than we usually